G'day people, Carlos here. Welcome again to my show, my weekly live stream. When talking about archaeology, I always talk about fossils, about the fossil record, the hominins that we dig up. Now, the question is, how did they get there? How do we find the fossils? The process of fossilization is very, very complex. It is very rare because it has to have the correct conditions. Now today I'm going to talk about the conditions that would take a primate to become fossilized, and I'm going to read an article which is a very useful article. I'll just share it so everyone can see. Knowledge project, the Nature Education, and it's how to become a primate fossil, because after all, humans are primates. We belong to the primate order. Now, fossils, as the article says, are very rare because their formation and discovery depends on a change of ecological and geological events that happen over deep time. The deep time is the key. That's where a lot of people that don't believe have the problem. They cannot see deep time along the huge amount of it. Here we have possibly some archaeologists or paleontologists uncovering some fossil beds. This is from Holly Dunsworth. Now, the article goes on to, only a small fraction of primates that have ever lived has been preserved as fossils. After death, most primate bodies are eventually dismantled, devoured by predators, scavengers, microbes. We'll stop there. Just mark this off so I won't get lost. Everyone's seen, I think, National Geographic specials where the cats or the predators take down an animal. Let's take a leopard taking a baboon, because he's a primate as well. A cat kills it, then takes it up to his tree and starts eating it. Bits of it will fall off because the leopards obviously don't have knives and forks, so they rip, and they will chew the soft bones and discard the other bones that are slightly big. They drop to the ground. That doesn't mean that now we have conditions for them to become fossils. No, they will not become fossils then, because then the second layer of decomposition comes into effect. The scavengers, which also spread out the remaining bones, are taken back to, for example, a meerkat. It's a small rodent type things, or other smaller animals, carnivorous animals can also take those that scavenge on the boat. But vultures, for example, all those sorts of things. G'day Gunny, g'day Warped and Carlos, how are you guys? Just say a quick goodbye. I'm looking at the chat now. And the remains undergo chemical composition, and ultimately their molecules are scattered across the ecosystem and recycled, because after, in the normal conditionings, the bones, some of the remaining flesh, some of the skin, etc., will be decomposed by bacteria, fungi, and the acidic, if it's acidic bases of granite type dirts, like even what I have here. Hello guys. How I have here. Everyone listening, am I coming on okay? Not too soft. How's the volume? Just so I don't want to be too. I think the volume's okay. On the meter here, it seems okay. So now get back to it. That's how a huge percentage of dead material, dead animals end up. Now, This is true for all organisms throughout history, because life as we know it depends on death and the decomposition of organisms and organisms. The fossil record is necessarily incomplete. As such, finding fossils involves not only perseverance and luck, but the discovery of a particular fossil also depends on the chance of that specimen preserved in the first place. That is why there are so-called holes in the archaeological record and the paleontological record. That's animals and so on. Because maybe not all of the species that have ever existed have become fossilized, or if they have become fossilized, we still haven't found them because they could be in places which we are still trying to find. That is one reason. Now, fossilization affects only a small fraction of the organisms that have ever lived. Exactly. There are well-documented conditions that foster the process. Thanks to Efremov's foundation of science of taphonomy, that comes from the Greek word laws of burial. The steps of fossilizations are not as mysterious to us as they once were. Shipman is reference of this story. The following taphonomic sequence will increase a primate's chance of becoming a fossil that one day will be studied by paleontologists, and if he's a hominin primate, by archaeologists, and then marveled at a museum visitors. Right, first thing, the animal has to die. That's obvious. You cannot start fossilization on a living organism. Okay, now that's step one. He gives here the examples: they die in the primate's habitat, or the carcass may be deposited in the carnivorous den. But then, even if it's deposited, right, the best chance of fossilization, the primate must be largely neglected until it is buried. So if it's taken into so let's go back to the 2 million years ago. Well, 3 million years. We'll use Lucy's example. Now, first of all, she fell off a tree. The latest archaeological study has shown that she fell off a tree and died. Right. She may have been, the tree may have been close to, say, I don't know. She died, and her body was basically neglected by the first level of attack of the decomposition, which is being eaten by carnivorous or scavengers. You can have, even if you die, you can have scavengers. They'll become the first one. If it's killed, that's the second level. Right, not entirely destroyed by predator scavengers, trampled by other organisms, or washed down turbulent riverbeds. Something that didn't happen to Lucy, and ultimately not completely recycled into the ecosystem. So as parts of its teeth, which are the parts that survive intact due to their chemical composition, to survive, to become fossilized, and bigger bones, for example. I'll show you figure 1, which is this one here, right? Even when these such things occur, fossilization can and does proceed, but the fossils may dismantle the carcass, diminishing the livelihood of fossilization and greatly reduce the opportunities for discovery, identification, and the analysis of the ancient primates' remains. For example, there could be it was deposited, say, fell into a shallow, muddy pool, like a billabong, gets quickly covered with silt, so it has no oxygen can get to it for the aerobic bacteria. The anaerobic bacteria will sort of preserve it, and if nothing touches that scenario, if the small pond, lake, whatever, dries up, it will become dirt, and that's one part. That'll be probably the initial beginnings of the fossilization. Now, but if an earthquake happens and it crumbles it up, or a flood comes through, flash flood, and washes the bones that are left, and scatters them, some could be preserved, the bigger ones, the teeth. Others could be completely dismembered, completely dissolved, completely gone. So they won't be preserved. Now here we have the feet of a primate. It's proconsul, in fact. It's probably proconsul is one of the ancestors to all apes and monkeys. Well, it's a primate. It's one of the original primates. It comes from the Kasawanga primate site in Africa. Now, the ape feet, which is this one, the articulated bones right and left of the adult proconsul Hesseloni. That's the museum. We give it the catalogue number. These ape feet remained intact upon burial and during fossilization. They were excavated roughly 20 million years later in Kenya. So this is the first evidence. This is what all primates arose from. These the proconsul, and all other primates, monkeys, and apes, which we are part of. Now, part number 3. So we know that he died. Then the animal, the remains have to be not disturbed for a while and get covered, so as to preserve as much of the material as possible. The quick way to do it, in a lot of sites, a volcanic eruption does the first 2 bits, and in fact the first 3 parts. That kills it. It provides the conditions where it won't be touched, and it buries it. The primate carcass is buried by geological processes. Sediments in which it is buried cannot be too acidic. Like if it's in a zone, areas where it's basaltic and granity areas, like where I live, dissolve bones in a matter of years. Nothing will be left after a couple of years, even if it's properly buried. Some silty lake bottoms are really hospitable environments. So are bogs and tar pits, because they are calcareous. They are base, the opposite of acidic. So they preserve much better the conditions. They basically cure the flesh. The bogs and tar pits cure the flesh and like preserving it, putting it in alcohol and so on. Which lack many of the microorganisms which could further disintegrate the remains. Although some wet environment, especially the anaerobic ones, which I mentioned, where there's no oxygen, offer fossil-friendly conditions. So do very dry ones, because dry conditioning dries out the moisture content of the body and mummifies it. That's what happens in deserts like the Atacama Desert and the Sahara Desert, and in Australia, the Australian deserts. Even in the Mongolian desert, what's it called? Anyway, the Mongolian desert, which is very dry conditions, also preserve the remains of the animal, in this case, the primate. Then sedimentation occurs most frequently and most rapidly in places where water and air are moving, or when other events, for example, volcanic eruptions, just mentioned, deposit soil, mud, sand, ash, and dust on the landscape. So that's how you get the animal, the carcass. We'll call it the carcass. Buried quickly to preserve it as quickly as possible. This is from mechanical disturbance. I need a drink. I'm parched. Thank you, Levi. Yes, the Gobi Desert. That's the one I couldn't remember. Now, very sedimentary forces, then the chance of fossilizations are improved. If the primate dies in proximity to those forces, Burial by volcanic ash is especially helpful because depending on the geochemistry of the ejected sediments, not only could their conditions foster fossilization, but the sediment could be quickly dated, easily dated by geochronologists. I have a link on how you date layers, fossilization, and geochronologists, how you date volcanic ash. It's volcanic materials is easy to date because of the chemical composition and by geomagnetism. That's another way to date things. The lava, once it sets also the magnetic direction of the poles of that lava. So if you find lava that has the poles reversed, you know it's not recent, and you can date because we've found out from geology, there have been consistent reversals of the poles at certain intervals, and we know the dates, so we can date it that way. That's slightly indirect dating. Ideally, underground microbes, burrowing animals, and plant roots do not disturb, break up, or disperse the remains even further. Now, the animal has died. It's been neglected, and in a way got buried, so it's more or less intact. Then fossilization can occur. That's once it's buried in what is now termed the matrix. No, it's not the matrix which you are thinking. This article actually has a glossary, which I will go down here. And the glossary for the matrix, oh shit, sorry about that, guys, is this. The matrix, in paleontological terms and also archaeology, is the sediment or rocks surrounding the bones or fossils. So it's not where Neo is, and you won't find Agent Smith there. But I digress. I'll get back to the point 4 now. This is figure 8. This is a primate fossil. That's about 47 million years ago. You can see the soft tissue. You can see the bones, but you can also see the shadow of the soft tissue. This is exceptional preservation. It's indicated by the darkly stained matrix, the surrounding of the Darwinius Marsilea from Musel in Germany. It's that area where this primate was found. Has very, very fine silt. It must have been a lake with very, very fine silt, almost clay, and that's why it preserved that primate so well. And even with the shadow of its soft tissue, its bones, flesh, fur, etc. They discovered that the remains of this particular specimen remains of the food, leaves, and the fruit in its digestive tract, preserved in the abdominal region, and it comes from, like I said, 47 million years ago, the Middle Eocene in that place in Germany, Musel. Getting back to the article, once buried in what is now termed the matrix, it becomes the dirt, soil, etc., surrounding the animal that died. The organic materials that comprise the living primate can begin to disintegrate or chemical change along with the matrix, the dirt. Over deep, and I mean deep geological time, we're talking about 47 million years for this one. The one up there for this one, it's 20 million years ago. So 20 million years. It is a hell of a long time. Just a bit of reference. Anno Domini, our calendar, year 0, we are now at 2017. It's 2017 years from year 0, from Jesus Christ and that, to now. Look what has happened in those 2,000 years. All the civilizations that have gone up and down, all the inventions that have occurred, everything. Just to get you a small inkling, a small context of 20 million years and more than 47 million years. So this is here the scale 10 centimeters. So you can see what time we're talking about when we talk about geological time. Now, with the right temperature, chemical, and pressure conditions, the hard rocks are formed from soil, sand, silts, mud, ashes, and other types of loose sediments. They're compressed, they're heated to a certain amount, which changes them chemically and physically. This process is called diagenesis and refers to the lithification of both the sediment and the biological remains within the settlement. Once the once living organisms are transformed into rocks and leave impressions or imprints within the rocks. And then these rocks are referred to as fossils. What that means here is our bones are basically calcium carbonate, right? Now, calcium carbonate can be substituted for other chemicals like silicates, basically silicate carbonate, for example, silicates, which are basically what sand is and so on. The water, the conditions, water imprint, the heat, etc. The calcium is chemically transformed into silicate. I don't know the process. I just study what they are there, and they actually become rock. Even the impression of their soft tissue is rock. It's not the bones that we have now, but they can preserve the exact matrix, the exact not chemical composition, but exact everything. There's instances with super perfect preservation where surprisingly, even soft tissue has remained soft, but it's not soft tissue as muscle, etc. It's been chemically altered, so it's not based on carbon. It could be it's possibly based on other chemicals which are similar to carbon in composition, etc. I don't know much about it. I wish I had a geologist to explain it to me, but I couldn't get one at such short notice. So anyway, now these rocks are referred to as fossils, and the process is known as fossilization. Trace fossils are imprints left in the sediment of an organism, either during its life, like a footprint, insect nests, tooth pits of the bone of prey, or during its death. Can become rocks as well. We've known that our species, I'm highlighting this so I can mark it so I won't get lost. We've known that our hominid ancestors, from dating volcanically preserved from areas in QB4E in Tanzania, it used to be what they dated was a muddy riverbank where hominins, our ancestor species, walked by there. Then it was quickly covered by a volcanic ash, which hardened and became rock and preserved the footprints. As time passed, the erosion exposed those footprints, and we could date those footprints, and we found that bipedalism in hominins can go back to about 7 to 8 million years back. So Lucy was at 3.2 million, and bipedalism was 5 or 6 million years before. And that's how we know, without actually seeing the skeleton, the fossilized remains of something, we knew that bipedalism in hominins was a factor by studying these trace fossils. Now, many small bodied creatures are preserved by this way, and this is how the primates hair, skin, and organs can be preserved. Figure 2, which is this one. Yeah, how it's preserved. It gives an example. We already talked about it, so I won't go again. But these are very rare cases. Instead, primates are usually preserved by petrified teeth and bones that can be extracted from the surrounding rock. These kinds of fossils can be formed in two major ways. Casks usually occur when the decaying remains dissolve completely and leave the space that becomes filled in or replaced by sediment, which then becomes rock. This is how brain fossilized and sometimes how whole organisms like invertebrates can be preserved. This process of replacement can be extended to isolated bones and fossils if none of the original material is preserved. We see that a lot in the God, I can't remember the name of that place. Burgess Shale in Canada or some sort. It's on the Rockies, the Canadian Rockies. It's basically where they found the preserved remains by this type of imprints of the very first animals that have existed, Burgess shale deposits. I can't remember exactly on what the exact location of those deposits, but that's interesting. Here's an example of a fossilized grasshopper. Grasshopper. Found preserved in the Nother ancient elephant relative footprint. Near the R14H ape in the tree site on Rusinga Island, Kenya. It's one of the back is flipped upside down. So the one's back to the stepped an elephant ancestor stepped on these two grasshoppers, killing them, and the dirt covered them up. So because they were in a dry place, most likely, they were first dried out quickly, and then they were replaced by the stone through what they mentioned here, through substitution of the preserved remains. However, much of what primate paleontologists collect and study were not mere casts, but are comprised and part at least of actual fossilized bones and teeth that have been transformed over deep time. Bone, like wood, is porous and full of canals, which, when the bone is buried and are filled in by calcite and silica and other materials and compounds, they precipitate out of the groundwater, or that are leached out of the surrounding sediment matrix. These new materials may change the color of the remains, and in addition, the petrifying or cementing the biological tissues. These processes may also leave delicate cell structures intact. I think this is quite explanatory. Burgess, thank you, Gunny. That's the one which I meant. I know. Yeah, it's a magnificent and fascinating place. I've never been there, but I've seen a lot of it. So this is how this is not a cast. These two fossils. I'll just put this a bit better. I think that's better. Yeah, that's better. These the bones that have been preserved and replaced by other chemicals, which then became fossilized, fossilized. Now, tooth enamel is deeply packed with a durable mineral called hydroxyapatite. Hydroxyapatite. Sometimes that takes me a bit to pronounce that, but I get there. Which make teeth much better than bones at withstanding chemical and physical degradation. That's why I've said this before. Homo sapiens denisovian or Homo sapiens altai, which is the same thing, the cousins of us and Neanderthals, we have 3 teeth, a couple of molars, and a small knuckle, a small bone of the finger. The teeth are super easy to to fossilize, because what it means here, they just resist chemical attack and physical degradation. They're super hard. They're really hard. You can also call them. You could almost call them the diamonds of the biological world, living world. That is not because diamond is pure carbon anyway, and so are the bones of the teeth, and that carbon with the chemical, the high hydroxyapatite, which is a silicate, by the way. Then diagenesis is not a uniform. As a result, teeth are the most abundant elements in the primate fossil record. Fortunately, paleontologists can use teeth morphology to identify species quite accurately. Diagenesis that's it, is not a uniform process. Man, that's a word to it. Yes, exactly. The Badlands of Alberta are also another just perfect place that preserved the remains of animals. Tyrannosaurus rex is one of the most abundant, fossils found in that place. Yes, thank you, Gunny. Now, getting back to this one, specimens. Depending on the conditions, specimens that are only, I've got a note here, only partially fossilized are dubbed subfossils. These include the skeletal remains of animals that have been recently gone extinct. Like many species of giant lemurs of Madagascar, some of which were lost within the last 2,000 years, these recent fossils may also preserve DNA, which has been successfully extracted from the remains of subfossil lemurs and Neanderthals as well. To become fully fossilized, the remains really need a lot of time, as I explained before. 2,000 years, you still, if it's in a place where it preserves it, where it doesn't acidically attacks it, like I said before, in a granite areas. If it's in, say, limestone areas, beautiful preservation of recent of bones, you will find that they are not complete. They're still bone. They're still natural bone, or getting there. So you can extract the materials, the genetic materials. 50,000 years is subfossils. 100,000 years, it's almost getting there. 1,000,000 years, yes, absolutely. 1,000,000 years, you get a full fossil, and it's a lot of time. So deep geological time is absolutely crucial to fossilization. I can't emphasize that anymore. And also to the evolutionary process revealed by the fossil records. Of course, because as animal die, as a species dies, the individual elements, animals of that species, they die, and if they get preserved, the fossil record will show the slow evolutionary change which they are undergoing. Of course, some may not survive due to many factors. You say in a period there were earthquakes, for example, that mixed up the area, and so didn't preserve that time frame, as well as when it was more calm, when the geological time, geological also changes, climatology climate also changed during huge time periods. Like the Sahara has gone from tropical forests, lush rainforest to desert to lush rainforest to desert to lush rainforest again to desert as we have now. It's used to be cyclical events, not as much as it is now, but it could happen again. One of the reason that I think that the major deserts occurred well, at least the Sahara anyway, is the closing of the Panama Strait 20 million years ago. About 20 million years ago, the North and South American continental plates were separated. So there was war rushing, there was an ocean, there was a sea, an ocean, there was an ocean current that was passing through that strait. When it joined up, the tectonic plates joined the two continents together, it stopped that current, which went up to California. Not to California now, I digress. It went up because the equator divides one part of the other, but it stopped that current from entering into the Atlantic Ocean and possibly bringing moisture or whatever to Africa. The currents were all weird. The Gulf Stream didn't exist then, 20 million years ago. When it closed, we know that, or 20 or a bit further back, I'm not entirely sure the date, but they pushed the closing of the continental, the North and South America, also caused the beginnings of the glacial periods. Well, one of them anyway. The other ones were caused by other factors, but the last glaciation or period, which we are still in, we are just in the interstitial period, which means in a warm period. This block of glaciations started, I think it started when it did start 20 million years ago, when the closing of the I might be wrong with this, so I won't go any further on that. I'll have to look it up, or I might do another video on the glaciation, because I'm getting confused myself. I haven't really thought about this. So let's get back to this one. Things. Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. Gani, about 10 to 12,000 years ago, Egypt being green and all that. Yes, exactly. Anyway, where are we? Deep geological time is absolutely crucial. Intervals. There are tricks to attempt to comprehend deep time, like unrolling a long strip of paper and ticking off time intervals over a million years ago. I can see time, so I can see 1 million years. I can see 20 million years in my head. I don't need these tricks. I used to do these tricks, but it just occurred to me. So calibrating distances on the globe to match depth of time, or animating a few branches of the primate fossil record into the timeline. Demonstrations like these reveal the fact that there are many more gaps in the fossil record than there are fossils, which is obvious. Earth's evolutionary history includes so many organisms and covers such deep time that it is taking generations upon generations of paleontologists and archaeologists to go into the field, collect new specimens to fill in the gaps of the fossil records. Many may have been forever destroyed by us, our interaction with the Earth. Happens. And by actual geological events, earthquakes, tidal waves, etc., etc. Subsiding of the sea areas, during glacial maximums, the sea level's lower than it is now, then it gets flooded again, all those factors. So the primitive fossil records. Now, then we get to the discovery. After it's laid in the ground for X amount of time, comes along smart-ass, young, strapping, in my case, archaeologist, in this case, a paleontologist, because they're talking about generic primates. And they undertake expeditions to collect the fossil primates. The paleontologists first look at the geological maps of the region to determine if the rocks are the right type of period and are actually present and exposed in the landscape. This is interesting. Fossils are preserved in strata, layers upon layers. It's like a lasagna. I think that's what a good analogy would be. You have the original rock where the first fossil was laid down, gets covered up by a couple of layers. Different geological events could occur. A dry spell, a wet spell, and then a dry spell again, and then a volcano covers it up. Then another animal dies on top of that. He gets covered up. Same thing. Another layer upon layer, like a phyllo pastry, like a lasagna again, till you get this will the Earth appears to sink, but it's not. It's actually rising. But you can also have earthquakes that could sink it, and then erosion starts to hit in. A river could start eroding that area, that small mound, that small hill, exposing a side of those. It's like passing a knife through a lasagna. I love using that. I love food, so I'm using the lasagna analogy. And exposing those layers of rock. By luck, a paleontologist, in his case an archaeologist comes along. He knows that it is the right period of time. A geologist has measured, dated the sediments in that area. A geographer would also note any features, like paleogeographer, or even a geographer wouldn't note that there may be lakes here, the materials that have settled, that formed the layers. Some of them were lake, some of them were dry, some of them were forest, because you can tell, even after millions of years, you can chemically analyze those layers and know what type of environment it formed those type of rocks. And then he comes along and he starts digging. If they are interested in finding the most ancient fossil apes, the proconsul, then they look to the rocks that have been dated to the early Miocene period, epoch. If these rocks have not been dated either absolutely, using not radiocarbon, radiometric dating, we are using anything above 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 is the absolute maximum we have now for radiocarbon dating. Anything past that, we can use other materials. We can use thermoluminescence. We can use uranium argon dating. That's what they're mostly use for fossils of dinosaurs, which are 60, 70, 80, 100, 200, 300 million years ago. In the Burgess shelf, the Burgess deposits, they use uranium lead dating because the rocks are just fucking too old, 640, 740 million years ago. They are, that to me, I don't see that as a lot, but many people just say, nope, can't be that much. Nope. I can't fathom 640 million, let alone a million. So yeah. I can see 15 billion years is, to me, I can see it. It's training. Wikipedia snippet, yes, it is. Carbon-14 is about 5,000 years, but that's why you can date to 50,000 years. But there are some techniques now that can extend it to 70,000 years. You are right. I'm not saying you are wrong. You are right. Now, getting back to it, that's absolute dating, but you can also have relative dating with stratigraphic methods. Trilobites. Trilobites were the first animals that basically started the dating comparative stratigraphic method, relative dating, because they didn't know how to date in the early late 1900s. I'm talking about 1870s up until 1933, when we discovered radiometric dating with radiocarbon. Up until then, we didn't really know how to date layers. So they would use relative comparison dating. I have it here. Comparison relative dating on the stratigraphic model. They'd find trilobites because the trilobites in layers, you could see that they different species. They were evolving. You would never find one species of trilobites in, say, 2 layers above associated with another type of species. So they would know that, say, in Devon, trilobites from Devon would be the same as trilobites from Leeds. I'm giving English names out just because they're coming into my head. They're just the comparison. From the same level, they would be from the same age. That's what I'm trying to make out. It's like laying a layer of lasagna all across England, and on that first layer, you have one species. On the second layer, you have another species, even though they could be way different distances or even at different heights, because the Earth moves. Geological events from earth buckling, from I just said it before, from tectonic movements and plates that buckle mountains like Mount Everest. They're finding seashells on top of Mount Everest, because now Mount Everest used to be in the bottom of the sea before India, the subcontinent of India bumped into Asia. So that's what I mean. That's how you use relative dating. Demonstrate that the early Miocene species are present, indicating the proconsuls may be present as well. So if you want to know, if you find you see a layer that's been more or less dated in one area, and you see the same layer in another area, you would say, yep, proconsul could be found in these two, even though they could be distances apart or even in altitude differences. That's how relative dating works. Now, once rocks of the right age are pinpointed on the map, then paleontologists, archaeologists in my case, may use Google Earth. It's a tool. And what's that other thing? I'm really bad at names. Just having a drink while I think. There is a protocol, and it's like GIF in GIF for LP or JPG, JPEG for pictures. I think it's SIG, GIS. That's it, Geographical Information System. GIS. It is wonderful to pinpoint. You can use GPS, and it stores it in a format which is GIS, Geological Information System, and then you can use Google Earth to put and use that information to work it, to track, to analyze, to do everything. Aerial photographies using a plane, automobile, satellites. You can use radar, ground earth penetrating radar to basically excavate in archaeology without actually using a shovel. It's being used now in radar as well. Or on foot to determine if the rocks are exposed, accessible, or free of thick vegetation, etc., etc. The word fossil derives from the Latin verb for dere, which means to dig. When I first saw this word in Portuguese and in Spanish, but it's not pronounced the same, for dere means to fuck. In Spanish, the F would be would be exchanged for an. It's written with F, but it's read as a H. Joder. When I saw this to dig, I killed myself laughing. I really lolled. So just a bit of snippet. Foder without the last E is fucking Portuguese. Sorry about that. Um, um, However, one needs not always to dig in order to find fossils. There are localities like in Cubofora in northern Kenya. I said before Tanzania. I apologize. Tanzania is not Cubofora. What's it is? Oh God, I'm terrible at names. Then you have also the Rusinga Island in Western Kenya. I know Kubai from archaeology. I don't know Rusinga Island because that's paleontology. But they're using primates. I use hominins and more of us, more humans. And where many fossils have been found and where vertebrate fossils litter the ground. Here's an example, hiking through Kenya. That's how Lucy was basically found. That's how, well, in a cave, Naledi man was found. In Spain, they were opening up in Spain, Atapuerca, where I've talked about the cannibal Neanderthals. The Silla de Ursos, the cave of the bears, Silla de Ursos, which they found Homo erectus to Homo sapiens sapiens in that smaller in Spain, was opening up a railway track type things. So, Cubofori, they found the fossil primates belonging to Therapithecus, Australopithecus, and Homo, us. Stay tuned. I'm monitoring Homo habilis. Homo habilis is in debate at the moment in the archaeological and anthropological communities, the real type of communities. As new information and new fossils are being dug up, Homo habilis may be renamed to Australopithecus. That is my opinion. That is not a fact. I think, my opinion is that as more information comes along, Homo habilis may become Australopithecus habilis or some other name that they might name it. I don't know. Some other more sites. You can see that's a pelvic bone. No, that's a pelvis. Let's see if I get it right. Systematically excavate the broken. This bone is it's the shoulder, that shoulder blade thing that we have. It's not mentioned here, but I know it because of the fanning here and how it is. It will be attached to the shoulder thing. It says here, paleontologists systematically survey and excavate broken bone from large mammal, which this would be one, at the site of the Rusinga Island, where fossils of the stemate proconsul have been collected along with other primates. That then Dendropithecus and Mayoeticus. These are primates equivalent, just different form of extinct primates, extinct apes that have lived, not just apes, but monkeys, prior monkeys, etc. And hundreds of other fossil vertebrates, invertebrates, and even fossil leaves, tree roots and tree trunks, etc. Now, we can summarize this. Primate fossils are often hard to find. No shit, Sherlock. We know that they are hard to find. And not because they're hard to see, but because there's a slim chance of a dead primate. Substitute dead primate for every animal and plant that has ever existed on Earth, transformed into rock. Then they found thousands or hundreds of or millions of years later, if a primate is going to become a fossil, then it needs to be buried quickly. Like I said, not the primates. If any, we'll still stick to primates. Needs to be buried quickly before other organisms devour and scatter the bones. It should die near a river, get covered, pond or lake, get covered quickly, where water is constantly building up sediments. These sediments cannot be too acidic or contain too many microorganisms. since these promote chemical degradation. If the conditions are sufficient, the organic materials in the primates' bones and teeth lose their organic properties and take on the mineral and chemical properties of the surrounding matrix, the surrounding earth, etc. The transformation is fossilization. Over time, as bones and teeth and the surrounding sediment metamorphosize, they change the soft tissue, which are rarely preserved. However, crania may leave brain casts behind, and skin may leave impressions in the trace fossils if the material, the matrix, is fine enough. Clay and fine clay is perfect for leaving these impressions. Paleontologists, archaeologists strategically survey rocks with geological ages that correspond to the chapter in Earth's evolutionary history that they're interested in learning in. Of course they would. They wouldn't be searching for Neanderthal 50 million years ago. That's stupidity. If they found one, God, then they would know that there was a time machine. So yeah. For primate evolution, the chapter begins roughly 65 million years ago and continues throughout today and will end in an unknown time in the future. Exactly. We are still evolving. We are the transitional fossil that many creationists say. There is no transitional fossil. Yes, they are. Every fossil that we dig up is a transitional fossil. And the postscript: fossil remains revealed in paleobiology of an organism, and none of the information has any scientific value without context. That is pure truth. If you take a bone out of, if you pick up a bone and take it home, and then say, look, you hand it into a paleontologist or an archaeologist and say, look, I found this bone. The bone's useless. Now, if you find the bone and bring in the team of archaeologists, paleontologists, say, look, I found the bone, you will be richly rewarded. No, you won't. You'll get your name. You will get your name published though. And that's the context, because we need to know the surrounding matrix, dirt, etc. Because from that we can identify the environment in which it lived in, the age in which it lived in, the conditions that that got it to become fossilized, and in that layer, if we dig that layer and we find other animals, we can build up a whole ecosystem. We can build up a whole ecosystem. I don't think there's anything more specific than that, or less specific anyway. Just gonna grab my other beer, because it's a Guinness, by the way. That's what I mean about context. You see the data for the location. They know where it was found. If you take it and say, oh, it was found over there, that's it could take you to the same place, but it's not the same, not the same thing. He could forget about it. Like if you found it in the middle of a place where he didn't know, if he was an idiot tourist who walks along and going from a village to another village in, say, some place in Africa or in Australia or whatever, and he finds a bone and he keeps walking, but he's fucking lost. He doesn't remember where he found. It's lost. But if he leaves it there and says it was found more or less in that area, the archaeologists, paleontologists will search and will find it there, even if it will take time. That's what context is. Scientists cannot relate a fossil to the other living or a fossil without that context. They can't associate them. And the understanding change over time: adaptation, variation, relatedness of the organism, okay, the phylogeny, and so on, are the goals of paleontology, archaeology as well. And now for the context of the fossil is absolutely crucial to make or breaking scientific hypothesis. And in a hypothesis is facts in the scientific parlance. So it's a hypothesis is the questioning, and which will lead to a theory. And the theory is the fact. It's like the law, the theory of gravity. We know it exists because we fall down all the time. We can test it by jumping off a building. If we float up, we disprove gravity. And I wish many flat earthers would try to disprove gravity for me, preferably off the Empire State Building. Or the other building in Bahrain or whatever the fuck it is in Africa, in Arabia, or the EU way. If a fossil has no context, then it cannot be placed in the tree of life. It cannot be evolutionarily linked to other organisms. I'll give you an actual example of what I mean. We were in the museum which I work. We have 3 bayonets. I know that they are of English design. They are the English locking. They have the English locking mechanism for the muskets. Muskets, not they were not the modern ones. This is during early 19th century, mid 19th century type bayonets, and they were of the Portuguese army. How do I know that they were there? Well, where I live, they had a garrison up until 1855 in our castle. So that's the partial context. They are of English design, which were used by the Portuguese during the 1800s. They were given to us from locals who had them, probably found them, or whose great grandparents and so on kept them from the actual soldiers that were stationed here, and they were given to us but they were given to us out of context. I can't date them. I can't actually associate those bayonets to Portuguese soldiers specifically. If they were found in the castle, yes, I could. But as they were given to us, I can't. That's exactly how the fossil record works in terms of context. And the rest of the thing goes on to agencies, permits, you can't collect fossils, etc., etc. Now, the glossary, as I was saying, anaerobic refers conditions without oxygen. So you can't have decomposition, rotting, diagenesis, the general term variably used to describe the conditions and processes involving in turning biological and geological matter into rock or into a different rock. And I'm not going to read the rest of the glossary. The links to this article is in the description, as I always do. My description. You should go there. You should consult it, because I don't just have this article. I also have two articles explaining geological stratification and sedimentation. I have 2 articles on dating the fossils and stratified rocks. And I have a video, if you don't know what the scientific method is, which I'll include in nearly every video, it's for children, from one of my favorite childhood series, which is called The Curiosity Show. And it explains in the most simplistic way what the scientific method is, so it could be fucking used to explain it to idiots. So yes, how long have I been on? I've been on for an hour. Which is weird, which is good. So anyone have any queries or so on? The Burj Khalifa. Thank you, Levi. Yes, that one. The fucking Burj shitty thing. It would be removing evidence from the scene of the crime, expecting evidence to make sense. Yes, it would. Wikipedia snippet. Exactly. Perfect analogy. Good on you, man. Let's see. Are there any recent mummifications? Yes. Many medieval saints scattered across the Christian kingdoms of, or former Christian areas. Well, the Catholic areas, which are, the Catholics love making saints. There are many modern saints, mummification examples. So yes, there are Rami Paws 994. Yes, there are recent mummifications. And Incas, they are finding Inca mummies that are only 1,500 years, 1,600 years old. It's very, very recent. What else? Curiosity shop. This one, I don't know about that. In Australia, was the Curiosity show to hipster scientists. One has a mustache, the other one has a the shaggy type beard, chin beard type thing. So yes, they are. So fossils are a modern day social construct, Gunny. Yes, they are, mate. Okay, guys, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you for showing up. I hope this was entertaining. Was it one of my more comfortable programs I did? Sometimes I struggle when I don't know. I struggle, like I was struggling about the geological period, what happened with the closing of the isthmus of Panama, the currents and so on. I'll look at that up, and I might do one in the future. And if there is any geologist listening, I would appreciate to be corrected in any errors I made. But I think I've did enough. I grew up being taught good with a good education in Australia where I live there. It's shit now, apparently. But when I was growing up, when I was there, they taught us well. All the STEM subjects, girls, boys, we were taught exactly the same. Uh, they weren't any better than me. I wasn't any better than them. But I learned Geology 101, Geography 101 in primary, secondary, secondary education, biology, geology, geography, basic physics 101, chemistry 101, and they were the basics. I was shit at maths, so I didn't take maths 101. It's my kryptonite, unfortunately. I wish I knew more about math than I do now. So yeah, so I know enough of the stem of these fields which I mentioned to not be embarrassed in the presence of better men than I am. And on that note, I bid you all a good night, and see you